you know who I am. Let's get this show on the road. It's been an eventful last few days, to say the least, so I have a lot to cover. After our Home Depot adventure, rule number 7, fuck Home Depot, we started trying to think of possibilities for where the elevator might be. Because, as you know, it finally occurred to me that Waffles was describing an elevator. Maybe I should have put that together before now, but hey, sue me. It's not a crime to be bad at logic in high-stakes situations, and it's been pretty obvious since day one that I suck at riddles. I think we should just take a moment and celebrate the fact that I figured it out at all. There's still the second part of the riddle, though. The location of the elevator. We've got a whole goddamn city of possibilities. Well, I guess not everything is a possibility, like we can eliminate all the outdoor parks and buildings with super small elevators meant only for a few people, like hotels, since any elevator that fit Waffles and the rest of a Brentford has to be pretty freaking big. All this to say that we've been doing a lot of research. I've even seen some great suggestions from y'all, so thank you for that. We have an ongoing list of options that's updated almost by the hour as we change our minds about likelihoods or come up with a new idea. We've got a ways to go. It's a long list. In the meantime, we thought we'd also work on trying to find a mic. You know, to save some people. We can't work on the elevator thing all day every day without wanting to find a Caleb and let it rip us to pieces. Trust me, spending more than a few hours at a time circling around the same thoughts and scrolling through the same mental lists is soul-crushing. Anyone who's ever studied for a high school test will know the feeling. So, we've been looking for a mic. The problem is they're not common, and they don't really seem to have particular patterns in where they hang out, which means it's mostly a crapshoot to find one. Case in point, we've been looking for a mic since I first made it to the bookstore weeks ago. It's constantly been our secondary project behind first marking the dome and finding a door, then planning for the hardware store, and now finding the elevator. But in the month or so that we've been searching, we haven't found a mic once. That's why I never really bothered to mention that we were working on the mic thing too, because there's been no progress at all on that front for the past month. Until a few days ago, that is. See, we'd been working on the list for hours, and we needed a break. We decided we'd go for a walk and try our luck at a mic hunt. After prepping our supplies, you can't just go on a walk around here without all your monster-killing equipment after all of us except Waffles headed out. Yes, he's a great asset to have with us, but he'd been out all night looking for any signs of a mic or an elevator, so he needed some sleep. Usually we waited until later in the day to go out walking and could bring him, but this time we figured we could handle it ourselves, so we left him sleeping on his nest of pillows on the bookstore's floor. Our smartest move? Maybe not. But hey, we're trying to take good care of Waffles and Mr. B, and that means not working them to death. We never take the same route twice when we go on these mic hunts, obviously, because that would just make it too easy for the people watching us to set up a trap. We're trying to minimize our predictability here. But we do take routes that take us through a few of the same spots, namely the places where Zoe and I have met mics previously. Like I said, we have no idea where we're most likely to find one, so visiting the few places where we have encountered them is our best lead. We hope that if we were lucky, maybe the mics frequent similar places, or maybe they have a home nearby. Obviously, this has not worked for us yet, but we didn't have a better idea. You know what? I don't have to defend this thought process to you. It was our best lead, and it doesn't matter anyway, because a few days ago, it finally worked. Or we got lucky. I don't know. Who cares, because it ended up being right. Zoe and I were walking side by side near the place where she'd met and killed a mic. It was actually kind of close to my old neighborhood, which was making me slightly uncomfortable. It always did. I'd walked home from school down this street sometimes. It may even have been the one I ran down in a panic when the monsters descended, trying to get to my family before it was too late. Not so spoiler alert, assuming you've been following along. I didn't get there in time. If we'd kept walking a few blocks and turned 2 corners, I would have been able to see my house. My house. Which I hadn't been back to since the day I saw my family die. Which is why we didn't keep walking a few blocks and turn 2 corners. I was distracted, thinking about my house and trying to stop thinking about my house, before it took a worse turn, when suddenly 2 things happened that snapped me out of my thoughts. Zoe suddenly held up her arm to block me from walking any further, and Mr. Bailey meowed. I held totally still, only moving my eyes to glance sideways at her. "What?" I whispered. "I heard something down that alley," she whispered in response. We were standing on the sidewalk in front of a store and a restaurant. Only 3 steps or so ahead of us, to our right, an alley opened up between the 2 buildings and led off into shadows. As we both stood motionless, I heard a noise from within it too. It sounded like something rummaging through a dumpster. "Think it's a mic?" I asked. "Only one way to find out," she answered, and before I could do anything, she took the few steps forward to peek around the corner of the alley, axe in hand. And, well, I guess even that movement was enough to draw the attention of what was, in fact, a mic. Still frozen in place, I heard a roar, and Zoe yelled, "Fuck!" and scrambled backwards into the street. The mic had reached her in a second. She swung her axe, because at this point it had already seen her, and I think she hoped she could hit it in the face before it opened up its black hole, but the mic was moving too fast. She missed, and with a large paw it batted the axe out of her hand, and its horrible little mouth began to widen. I was still only a few feet away. If I moved, the mic would see. Mr. Bailey was still on my shoulder too, which means he couldn't move without giving me away too. My heart was racing a million miles a minute in fear watching Zoe struggle, but I had to wait until I was out of its peripheral vision, until I was in its blind spot, rule number 3, before I could do anything. Luckily, Zoe knows my rules too. She looked at me, I could see the panic in her eyes, and managed to give me a little smile. Then she punched the mic in the eye, narrowly avoiding its growing mouth. This bought her maybe 3 seconds. It howled and flinched back just enough for her to run further into the street. Then it raced after her, moving inhumanly fast, and this time it pounced on her, knocking her to the asphalt like it had with Evelyn. I guess it wasn't taking any chances with leaving her standing and giving her an opportunity to punch it again. She still tried, though. Despite my fear, I felt a twinge of pride at how unwilling Zoe was to give up. Unfortunately, when she tried to punch its eye this time, its mouth had expanded enough that her hand simply went into the black hole. I saw her eyes widen in shock as her fist hit nothing but the swirling darkness inside the mic, and her expression turned to horror as her arm was pulled in, beginning to drag the rest of her body with it. I had to act fast. She had seconds before she was sucked into the black hole, and sure, I could maybe kill the mic once she was totally eaten, but it'd be a lot harder if its attention was no longer taken up by Zoe. What if it saw me move and got me too, and we were both floating in empty nothing for eternity? What if it ran away after getting Zoe and I never managed to track it down again? No, I had to act now. Zoe had let it chase her far enough into the street that I was in its blind spot, and her axe was lying on the sidewalk. Giving a battle cry, it couldn't hear me after all, I ducked down, grabbed the axe, and sprinted towards the mic's looming back. And then, maybe this was a little bit overkill, but I wasn't taking any chances, I leapt up onto its back, grabbing a fistful of its dark fur to hold myself there, and swung the axe with all the strength I could muster, aiming for its spine. I heard bone crunch, so I might have succeeded. Either way, it was sufficient damage for the mic's body to seize. I think it would have roared, but its mouth was currently being used as a black hole to drag in Zoe. That was fine with me. I yelled, "Die, motherfucker!" and pulled out one of the bigger knives from my belt. Climbing up over the axe, my weight only buried it deeper. Fantastic. I made it high enough on the mic's shoulders to reach up and drive the blade of the knife deep into its neck. The combination of the axe and knife must have been enough to mortally wound it, because after that the mic began to stumble back. After a few seconds, it roared, and I managed to peer over its shoulder and see that Zoe was lying on the street, breathing heavily but whole and relatively unharmed. Thank God. Only then the mic, rather than collapsing right there, tried to flee. Maybe its home was in the back of that alley somewhere and it hoped it could die there. I don't know. All I do know is that it turned around and began staggering across the sidewalk and into the shadows of the alley, with me still on its back, hanging on for dear life. Now, if you remember, when a mic dies, it spits out everyone it's ever ingested, and then the black hole collapses in on itself and sucks in not only the mic, but any weapons in its body. Considering that I was also on the mic, I was feeling some genuine concern that if I didn't get away from it soon, I was going to be sucked into the black hole when it ate itself. And there was no coming back from that black hole. But I had to get Zoe's axe back. She loved that thing. And it was still deeply embedded in the mic's spine, just below its shoulders. As the mic continued to regurgitate people, it had started as soon as it began moving, and there were probably about 10 dazed people in the street and alley now, and stumbled forward. I desperately tried to keep my grip on this bumpy death ride with one hand, while grabbing the axe's handle and pulling as hard as I could with the other. Zoe had gotten to her feet and was running after us, dodging the trail of confused people. "Eli, get off!" she shouted. "Great idea, didn't think of that," I yelled back, still trying to dislodge the axe. God, no wonder I'd killed the mic with this. It was wedged in there with some serious force. I hadn't realized adrenaline made me so strong. The only problem was, where the hell was that strength now? This part's a bit of a blur, to be honest. I saw more people on the pavement behind us as the mic continued to stagger towards the back of the alley. I saw Zoe chasing the mic out of the corner of my eye. I heard the roars of the mic and felt its heavy breathing and disjointed, struggling steps. I swear I could even feel my own blood pumping. And I just knew, with some kind of gut feeling, that there was only one more person, and that I had mere seconds before the mic died, before I went to an eternity of darkness along with it if I didn't get the fuck off. Maybe I should have just jumped off. But despite all this stuff I knew and felt and saw, I still had tunnel vision for that axe. All I could focus on was making sure I wasn't the reason Zoe lost her axe, even though I heard her screaming, "Eli, leave it! Get off!" from somewhere that sounded muffled and far away, like I was underwater. Then it all seemed to happen so fast. I released my grip on the mic's fur, dug my knees in against its shoulder blades, and used both hands to grab the axe's handle and pull. I felt it dislodge the tiniest bit and pulled even harder. My arms felt like they were being ripped from their sockets. And then suddenly it came free with so much force that my knees slipped completely, and I went tumbling down the mic's back, still holding the axe. I landed, breathless, on the ground. I smacked my head pretty decently, too. But I had the axe, and I watched as the mic howled one final time and staggered past the last person it had spit up. There, in the corner of the alley, its already huge black hole mouth expanded and swirled menacingly, and a second later collapsed in on itself, taking the rest of the mic with it like it had never existed. A second after that, Zoe had caught up to me. She knelt on the ground beside where I was now sitting. I held out her axe to her. "I got your axe back," I said. You idiot, she scolded. You think I care about a stupid axe when you could have been killed? You love that axe, I said. Yeah, but I care about you more, she said, and I could have sworn she was blushing. My heart, which was finally slowing down after its race, fluttered. She helped me to my feet. As soon as I was standing, Mr. Bailey was there, rubbing against my ankles and purring. I leaned down and scratched his back. You know, I think it's 3-1 now, I said. Zoe stared at me. What? Well, I saved your life, I said, so the number of times you've saved mine versus me saving yours is now 3-1. 3-2, if you count me risking my life to save your axe, too. Zoe shook her head, a little smile on her face, as if she couldn't believe I was bringing this up now. We're not counting the axe. 3-1 is the best I can give you. I'll take it, I said, finally handing it back to her. She smiled at me again, and this time I was sure she blushed. Thank you, though, she said, for saving my life. I mean, I had to. I'd be lost without you, I finished. Now I was blushing, too. I could feel my cheeks on fire. I turned away, hoping she hadn't noticed. God, why did I feel so comfortable around her and yet so nervous? Luckily, there was a good built-in distraction around us, all the people who'd just been regurgitated by the mic. In the alley and on the sidewalk, they were getting to their feet, talking to each other. There looked to be 20, maybe 25 in total. A few were hugging or crying, probably people who'd known each other and been together when the mic got them. Now, sticking together in a huge group isn't the best idea, but it sure made sense to at least talk to all of them and see what their plans were, if they knew anything that could help us, if they wanted any help. Zoe, Mr. Bailey, and I could show them places that didn't have cameras, give them a set of my rules, and tell them anything we'd discovered. After all, the more people we had who were alive and looking for a way out, the better all of our chances are at making it out of here. So I raised my voice and called out, "Hey everyone! This alley's pretty dark and small, so if you could all congregate on the sidewalk and street in front of the Italian restaurant out there, that'd be grand. I can let you know what's going on. Give us a minute." This seemed to work. People looked at us, probably recognized me as the crazy guy who'd ridden the bear like it was a horse, but nonetheless saved their asses, and decided they should listen. A few called out their thanks or spoke amongst themselves as they began to move out towards the street. Once the alley was clear, I turned back to Zoe. She looked at me with her eyebrows raised. "That'd be grand, huh?" she quoted. I didn't realize people still said that. "Sure they do," I said, like when I say, "In the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter that Zoe saved my life 3 times and I've saved hers once. We both saved each other's lives, so in the grand scheme of things, we're basically even." She rolled her eyes. "You know what I meant. And don't go getting all stuck up now. You've got 2 more life savings before we're even. Grand scheme be damned." She lowered her voice so anyone outside was sure not to hear. "What are you going to say to them anyway?" "Well," I said, "I was thinking that Suddenly I was interrupted by a cacophony of screams, human and monster alike. They were accompanied by horrible sounds of crunching and ripping, and they were coming from out in the street, where we'd sent all the people we'd just saved. Zoe and I looked at each other, and I could see the dread I felt reflected in her eyes. Without a word, although I'm pretty sure we were both thinking along the lines of shit, 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 we raced to the front of the alley. It didn't matter. We were too late. We emerged to the site of a massacre. It was awful. Blood, organs, limbs strewn everywhere. The few bodies that were still intact nevertheless had their throats ripped open or long gashes down their chests. A couple corpses weren't even recognizable as human, really. I'd like to say it didn't bother me, but seeing all the people who'd been so alive, who I'd just brought back to life only seconds ago, seeing them decimated like that and killed so brutally, well, it did bother me. I turned away from Zoe and threw up all over the sidewalk. As I was straightening back and trying to spit the taste out of my mouth, Zoe elbowed me in the ribs and pointed. I followed her gaze and my heart sank even deeper. From inside the store stepped an MJ. I knew this because it was wearing my face. I also knew it couldn't be responsible for the massacre because MJs don't kill their victims like that. No, this one was likely just chilling and watching the whole bloodbath, maybe waiting to pick off any survivors. It was being stupid if it thought being me would trick us, though. I mean, Zoe and I were both right here. But all of my initial thoughts were wrong. It wasn't waiting to pick off survivors, and it wasn't trying to trick us, for once, because it simply smiled its creepy smile at us, using my own face, and walked towards us. We stood our ground, since it couldn't do anything to us without its magic words. MJ Me didn't even try, though. Instead, when it reached us, it simply held out a fingerless hand. There, stapled to its palm, yes, stapled, I felt kind of bad for the poor bastard, was a folded slip of paper. I looked at MJ Me. If I reach out and pull this paper off your hand, that doesn't count as taking your hand, right? I'm not getting fucked over by semantics now. You didn't ask, so you can't do anything to me. MJ Me shrugged. Why don't you find out for yourself if you're so smart? It was smirking, but I was pretty sure I was right. Besides, not every day a monster comes up to you with a note after a massacre. So I muttered, "Fuck you," under my breath as I reached out and quickly ripped the paper off its palm, leaving the staple behind. Before I could even unfold it, MJ Me said, "See you around," grinning, and walked away, disappearing around the corner. I shook my head and flipped it off after its back was turned. If it wanted to find me again on a day that it was a monster and not someone's messenger, fine. But that was a problem for future me. The current problem was the paper. I unfolded it, and my heart dropped even further when I saw the words. They were in the same handwriting as the note we'd found in the dome room, only this time they appeared to be written in blood. Or at least ink designed to look like blood. I read it and then handed it to Zoe, and she read it aloud. We warned you to stop trying. Look at what you caused. Still think we're bluffing? We both stood there in empty silence for a minute. I don't think either of us knew what to say. What do you say, when you just managed to save 25 people only to see them die so much more brutally than they had the first time, and then get it blamed on you? I know what Caleb would say. Probably something like, they deserved it. These people were probably all assholes, and I can do no wrong, so clearly it's not my fault. It's karma. But Caleb was a dick, and I tended to think I'd just caused the horrific massacre of some good people. Man, fuck Caleb. Just as I opened my mouth to speak after several minutes, we heard a groan behind us. Zoe and I instantly spun around to see someone on the ground, shoving a gory, headless corpse off himself. Then this guy, covered in blood from head to toe, got to his feet. He was remarkably uninjured considering what had just gone down. Sure, he had some gashes across his chest and was bleeding from a nasty cut on his head, but all in all, he wasn't in awful shape, especially compared to the rest of the poor souls lying around us. He also looked familiar, but it was hard to tell for sure until he wiped the worst of the blood and guts off his face, and then looked at me. I swear we recognized each other at the exact same moment, because simultaneously I excitedly said, "Holy shit, Tristan, is that you?" And he less excitedly said, "God fucking damn it, anyone but you, Eli." Yeah, he's not a huge fan of mine. Never has been. Some people aren't. I just don't get it. "You know this guy?" said Zoe skeptically. "Yes," I said, stepping over dead bodies to get to him. "You remember me telling you about my best friend Nolan? This is his older brother." I reached him and pulled him in for a hug. Tristan did not seem to enjoy this, as he stood there still as a statue until I pulled away, then stepped back. It was beginning to dawn on me what this might mean. A pit growing in my stomach, I looked at the destruction around us. Shit, Tristan. Was Nolan here? Did he just get massacred? Tristan, although he glared at me, at least had the decency to sigh and somehow look both disappointed and relieved at the same time. "No," he said. "I assumed the bear had swallowed him too right after I got eaten, but he didn't come back out of it. He wasn't here at all. I have no idea where he is." Relief flooded through me. "But that's great," I said. "Well, maybe. If he escaped when you got sucked in, maybe he's still alive somewhere. We could find him." Tristan gave me his best death stare, and trust me when I say it was a good one. "I don't think so," he said. "I will find my brother. I don't need your help." "But we've been alive the whole time," I said, gesturing to me and Zoe. "We've never gotten eaten or killed once." "No offense or anything," I added since he was still giving me the death stare. "We could help you, and we're trying to find a way out of the dome. Maybe you could help us too. The more people working on it, the better." Something changed in his expression. It looked like something entirely forgotten had just occurred to him. He opened his mouth to say something, shook his head, and before I could ask what he'd just thought of, his death stare was back. "No," he said. "I just want to find my brother. I don't know what you've been up to, but it can't be good. It never is. I guess I should thank you for saving me, but that's it. I'll be parting ways now." "At least let us fix you up," Zoe said from behind me. She, too, stepped over the bodies to come and stand beside me. "I have medical supplies. I get that you seem to hate Eli, but maybe you can let me help you. For one night, at least." He looked back and forth between us, and blood dripped into his eye from the gash on his head. He sighed as he wiped it away. "Fine. One night," he said. And that's how we ended up walking away from a massacre with my best friend's angry brother, Zoe leading the way, Tristan in the middle, and me and Mr. Bailey in the back. "What did you think of back there when I mentioned helping us?" I hissed at him at one point. "Fuck off," he whispered back. "Play nice," called Zoe over her shoulder. Damn it, I'd been hoping she hadn't heard. We made it back to the bookstore, and Zoe treated Tristan. He seemed to like her, actually, though I've made no progress. Oh, and that's right, he's still here. It's been 3 days, and he's still here. And I'm convinced that whatever he thought of but didn't say is important. I think he won't talk about it because he hates me, but I'll figure him out. Our past doesn't matter anymore. I want to find Nolan too, and I want all of us to get out of here. Even Tristan, who once locked both me and Nolan out of the house in the middle of January at 2 a.m. We got so desperate that we climbed in through his parents' window and broke his mom's stained glass lamp. But guess who didn't get in trouble? Tristan. Guess who did? Me and Nolan. But I don't hate him. He may hate me, but that won't stop me. There's gotta be a reason that of all the people to survive that massacre by hiding under a corpse, it was him. And I sure as hell intend to find out what it is.